Hello there, and welcome back to this Java development course. So, last time we went over modifier types, and you had some homework to do. Your job was to create one of every single modifier type that we went over, a variable with the every single modifier type that we went over in the last lesson. So, here is essentially what you should have done. So, here I have, first of all, a private integer a equals 1. This means that it will only be visible inside this class. Then I have a default integer b, which is equal to 2, which means that this will only be visible inside this package. Then I have a protected integer c, which is equal to 3. This means that it will only be visible inside this package and in other packages, but only in other packages with classes that extend this class. And it can only be accessed using the super keyword. Then we have public int d, which essentially means it can be accessed anywhere, any way you want. Then I have a static int e, which means that we can refer to it without creating an instance of this class, so without doing new classes and objects. And then finally I have a final int f, which just makes this variable a constant, meaning it cannot be changed. So the only thing to note here very quickly is that we can actually have multiple modifier types. So we can have final static, so they don't interfere at all. And then we can also have public final static. So we can have, there's three things. This is an access modifier, and then final, and then static. They're sort of different in different leagues. But we can't have public and then private as well. So we can't have public private. So you can only have one access modifier. All right, and so that is essentially how we work with modifiers. Now, really the important thing about last lesson to understand was this private modifier here. Since today we're going to be going over encapsulation, and encapsulation heavily utilizes this private modifier. So let's take a look at exactly how that works. All right, so before, the way we would do things is we would have a class spider, right? And we would have a number of eyes attribute inside that class spider. So as we have here, there we go. We have public int number of eyes. And I changed up the code a little bit here just to make things a little bit less confusing and just for demonstration purposes. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, so that's actually how we would do things without encapsulation. So just have public int number of eyes, and then we just refer to it by doing r dot number of eyes, and then equals 56 or something like that. Now, encapsulation, on the other hand, would utilize something called getters and setters, or getter and setter methods. They're also called getter and setter methods. Anyway, so what are they? Well, they're essentially methods that we use to get and set an attribute of a class. So let's take a look here. So remember how we went over the private modifier? Well, that's actually what we're going to be utilizing. So we're going to do private int number of eyes. All right, so only this class can now refer to it directly. So here, now we can't utilize this. And now what we do is we generate getters and setters. So we do public void set number of eyes. All right. Public void set number of eyes. It's going to take in an int number of eyes, right? All right, and then inside we're going to do this dot number of eyes. There we go. Equals number of eyes. All right, there we go. So that is what we call a setter method. Then we're going to do the same thing for get number of eyes. So we're going to do public int get number of eyes. All right. And then we're going to do return number of eyes. And there we go. All right. So now how would we actually refer or get the number of eyes? Well, we would do it using r dot set number of eyes 56, and then system dot out dot println r dot get number of eyes. And there we go. And now if we run this, it appears that there is an error somewhere. Let me just take a look exactly where there is an error. In project line arithmetic operators. Right. Let's remove this. Okay. There we go. All right, now everything should work. There we go. So now if we run classes and objects, we get 56. So you'll see how we refer to the number of eyes attribute inside Spider, not directly. So not by doing r dot number of eyes, but by using the getter and setter methods. So that is essentially the very basis on what encapsulation is built, and technically, that is encapsulation itself. So there are actually a number of benefits that come along with encapsulation. So first of all, we have complete control over what exactly is set. So, for example, let's just say that we wanted, I don't know, a spider to have a maximum number of eyes. So clearly 56 eyes is a pretty crazy number. So I don't think a single spider has 56 eyes. So let's say that there's a limit of like 11, for example. We could go ahead and put in sort of a barrier. So we can do if number of eyes is less than, is less than 11 or so, just as an example, then we only do it. And if it isn't less than, then we just don't set it. So now when we do this, it will go ahead and return 0 since we don't set it. All right, and then that is one of the benefits. Another benefit is that we can make fields read only or write only. So let's say that we wanted number of eyes to be read only. So we can read it, but we cannot set it. All we would have to do is just remove this set number of eyes method. Just remove that, and now we can read it, so we can use get number of eyes, but we cannot use set number of eyes. So if we go ahead and actually in here, we can't use it since it doesn't exist. So we would have to not set it. So we cannot set it. Advantage of using advantage of using encapsulation. And then the final advantage is that we can actually change how we set or get variables inside the class, but we don't necessarily need to change any of the code that uses the given class. So let's just, for example, let's have a, here, let's just return back our set number of eyes method, right? And so, all right, so we have, set number of eyes, we're doing it, we're using it, everything is working okay. But then all of a sudden, we say, you know what, we want to set the number of eyes as a string. So it's going to be, a number, but it's going to be a string instead of an integer. So if we refer to it using the old method without encapsulation, we would do r dot number of eyes. Right. We would then have to do this, make this public. Actually, let's make it default just because it doesn't really matter. Okay, r dot number of eyes equals, let's say 56, right? But now we want to make this a string, right? So we change this int to string. So now in results, we get an error. So we get an error. We have to put a string here, but we have an integer. So now we have to change our code. So the client that's using the class has to change his code, right? But if we had encapsulation, on the other hand, we can simply do private string, and then inside the setter method, we would just do this dot number of eyes equals a string plus number of eyes, which will just convert this integer to a string. And then for get number of eyes, you would just do public string get number of eyes, and then or actually no, it would be public int get number of eyes. It would be we would actually have to use integer dot parseInt to convert a string to an integer. There we go. So this is just a method inside the class integer, which is a built-in class. So this will just return return a string as an integer. So it'll find an integer in the string and then return that. And so there we go. So now, since we are using encapsulation, so r dot set number of eyes, 256, there we go. Since we are using encapsulation, we can now change the data type without actually modifying any of the code that is actually using the class. So in this case, let's say that we want to change it back to integer at this point. So right now, you'll see to change it back to integer, or better yet, let's just say actually a float. So what if we wanted to change it from string now to a float? So we would just do float number of eyes, right? Then here, what we would do, it would be number of eyes. Just number of eyes. And then here, all we would do is return number of eyes, right? But cast an int. So just int number of eyes. And remember, this just cast float down to an int. There we go. And so so that's all we have to do. So we can now change the data type, and in here, nothing actually changes. We can keep on using the same exact code. And so that is the third advantage of using encapsulation. So encapsulation in general is actually one of the 4 fundamental concepts of object-oriented programming. So they are actually abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism, and inheritance. So we've already gone over inheritance, which is just a class extends another class. And then we've also gone over encapsulation. So all we have left now to understand is abstraction and polymorphism. So there are another 2 things. They're also pretty simple to understand. That's actually what we're going to be going over in the following lessons, in the final 2 lessons, actually. Now, encapsulation. So encapsulation, it's generally a pretty important part of Java in general. Pretty much all code that you're going to be writing, or all classes you're going to be writing, are going to use encapsulation. So it's important that you understand the concept. Encapsulation essentially is just a different way of writing a class, and instead of actually referring to a variable directly, so doing r.variable_name equals 56, it's just the practice of using getter and setter methods on a attribute of a class. And that's all that it is, so nothing difficult there. All right, now let's assign you some homework. All right, so homework is very simple. Just take the insect class that we already have and go ahead and encapsulate it. So encapsulate everything, as well as the spider class. I mean, I encapsulated to get in the lesson just now, but go ahead and encapsulate the insect class as well. So very simple homework. It should probably take like 2 minutes if you understand encapsulation. And the more important part is to actually understand encapsulation. So make sure you do that, and you're good to go. So next time we're going to be going over polymorphism, which has a very sort of weird name. I would say, perhaps it's not. I mean, I personally found it weird, but you'll understand in the next lesson what I'm talking about. And yeah, so yeah, encapsulate insect and spider if you haven't done that already. And I'll see you next time. Till soon.